I'm Joe Estey with Lucas Organizational Performance Training, and I'd like to talk to you about a very important employee engagement technique called the pre-job briefing. Now let's talk first of all about what a pre-job briefing isn't and all too often is. Number one, people try to use it as a just-in-time training technique, which is neither just-in-time nor real training. People who show up to do a job should be well versed in the job before we actually execute the job. That ties into the other thing a pre-job meeting should never be, which is a planning meeting. Here's the stages. You have to define the scope of work, which gives you a desired end result. You have to know those before you can ever analyze the hazards. Once you analyze the hazards and the likely situations, only then can you put the appropriate defenses in place to keep the hazard from becoming an unnecessary risk or to keep an error from becoming a consequence we're not looking for, nor do we ever want to have. So as a result, a pre-job meeting should be an opportunity to dialogue with the people doing the work to make sure that we're all on the same page, after the same goals, using the same process to get there. A pre-job briefing, meeting, a tailboard, a tailgate, or a ready-to-work meeting, whatever we call it as an organization, means this. The people who are properly trained with a job that has been properly planned are ready to execute the steps necessary to achieve the goal. Some of that dialogue is going to wrap itself around these important steps. Number one, you want to make sure everybody is in agreement with the desired end state. What does this job look like when we're completed? Number two, what's the method we're going to take for completing the job? There's one organization I work with who has developed a framework for the dialogue so every foreman, person in charge, and fieldwork supervisor can use to help keep the conversation in track. But remember, this isn't about leading by providing answers. This is about leading by providing questions that the folks who are going to participate in the activity are going to answer. It's called a flipped pre-job, meaning normally many people using their directed dialogue, whatever format they have, tell people exactly what they want them to do. That's not what this is. This is about having the people who do the work tell us how they're going to accomplish that task. But it's done in such a constructive way that it eliminates random acts of conversation. Where Steve over there is worried about the weather, so he's talking about wearing a coat, and Sue over here is worried about the steps the activity is going to have to progress through in order to accomplish the task, and pretty soon you're all over the map, so nobody is even following the same road to get to the destination. So here's the format I'd like to share with you. It's called SPEAK, S-P-E-A-K. So in holding the pre-job, you start it by perhaps saying this. Today's work is limited to. If you don't have a limitation statement, people believe everything they accomplish and anything they might add to it is okay. And it results in scope creep, which results in a loss or an injury. So start with, today's scope of work is limited to. And then use the SPEAK format. SS, summarize the critical step. A critical step is one that is non-routine, will have a consequence if performed incorrectly, and will not likely forgive you when it's performed incorrectly. So summarize the critical steps. And then P, past performance. Has anybody else accomplished this task under similar conditions or different conditions in the past? And talk about those experiences. The E stands for error likely situations, and you want to assess those. An error likely situation means that normally when you do this work, you don't make a mistake. And if you do, they aren't a big enough deal to worry about. However, an error likely situation today could be rolling the dice in an area of unknown and uncertain conditions where you might muster through just to get the job done, and unfortunately, you may get it done, but not without consequence. So an error likely situation is something where normally conditions allow you to minimize the consequence of any mistake, but today it's going to be great when they happen. Like not having enough equipment before you start the job, not ensuring the bottles are the right type of bottles you're using to pull a sample or to even breathe the air in the bottles in a supplied breathing system. And so minimize the mistakes during air likely situational assessments. The A in SPEAK is for assessing the foreseeable consequences of those air likely situations. And so if the truck doesn't show up in time, let's say by 10 o'clock in the morning, and we have to postpone this work until after lunch, What's the ultimate consequence? And the S part of what we're talking about, the critical steps. And then finally, K is for knowing your defenses and your controls before you begin work. So let's go through that just briefly. Today's pre-job meeting is limited to this. Once we describe the limitations of the work we're doing, we discuss and summarize S, the critical steps. And then P, any past performance. What did we learn in the past? E, air likely situations. A, we assess the foreseeable consequences of those air likely situations. And that leads us to K, knowing our controls and barriers before we begin this activity. It's not about you giving them the answers. They have the answers. They're skilled craft. They understand they work. Nobody wants to get hurt. So it's best to lead by questions and have them provide the answers. I'm Joe Estey. I hope you join us in the future with another organizational performance training moment.